Shabbat Shalom, everyone. It's a joy to be together in our virtual space on this Shabbat. And this week, we're honoring and participating as part of highest Refugee Shabbat, the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society. And we're marking this Shabbat a week late. And Care for the Refugee is really the essence of Judaism and of the American tradition, the tradition of the United States. The image of the Statue of Liberty, the image of Ellis Island, of generations of people coming to the United States to find safety and security. And it so resonates with the journey of the Jewish people throughout the ages and with this spirit as we're approaching Passover. And I'll do a fuller introduction later on, but it's a joy to have Delegate Kathy Tran with us from the 42nd District of the Commonwealth of Virginia, and also with the family, with Matthew and Davin and Charlotte and Quinn and Elise and Warren. So welcome everyone, and we join together with our opening song. And Rabbi Gorban, if you'll lead us with Hine Matov. Unmute. Rabbi Gorban, if you could unmute. So we're enjoying the playing and Yuval, and we're waiting for an unmute. There we go.
Okay, so you didn't hear any of that?
No, but we really enjoyed watching Yuval.
Okay. Yuval really wants to play the guitar.
That was actually how I decided where I'm going next year, is that there had to be a rabbi who gave birth and had a child in the infant years that I could watch for the year.
Okay, let's try this again. מלכים גם יחד. We turn to lighting our Shabbat candles. If you have them next to you, I invite you to light them with me. Ready to light the candles? Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lehadlik ner shel Shabbat. We bless our loved ones, children, spouses, partners, siblings, friends, and family with these words from the book of Numbers. Yevarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha, Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'chuneka, Yisa Adonai panav elecha, V'yasem lecha shalom, shalom, shalom. V'yasem lecha shalom, shalom. V'yasem lecha shalom, shalom, shalom. V'yasem lecha shalom, shalom. V'yasem lecha shalom. We lift our cups of joy as we sanctify Shabbat. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu v'shabbat kodsho be'ahava u'ratzon hinchilanu. Zikaron lemase bereshit, ki hu yom techila lemikrae kodesh, zecher letziat Mitzrayim, ki vanu v'acharta, ve'otanu kidashta, mikol hamim, ve'shabbat kodshecha, Be'ahava u'ratzon hinchaltanu, Baruch atah Adonai mekadesh haShabbat. We continue with words from Psalm 96. Shiru Adonai kol haaretz, Shiru Adonai shir chadash, Shiru Adonai kol haaretz, Shiru Adonai shir chadash. Sing unto God all the earth a new song. I will sing unto God a new song. Sing unto God and we'll all sing along. All the earth a new song unto God. Shiru Adonai kol haaretz, Shiru לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לך אדוני לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. אותי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לך אותי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. שמור וזכור בדיבור אחד, השמיענו אל המיוחד. אדוני אחד ושמו אחד, לשם ולתפארת בלי תהילה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לקראת שבת לכו ונחה, היא מקור הברכה, בראש מקדם נסוכה. סוף מעשה במחשבה תחילה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. התעוררי, התעוררי, היא בחורף וביאורי. אורי, אורי, שיר דברי, כבוד אדוני עלייך נגלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. If you'd like to join me in rising, welcome the Shabbat ride together. בואי בשלום עטרת בעלה, גם בשמחה ובצוהלה, תוך המוני עם סגולה. בואי חלה, בואי חלה, לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. ילה ילה לה לה, ילה לה לה, ילה לה, ילה לה לה, ילה לה, ילה לה. If you're comfortable doing so, rise for the Chatzi Kaddish into the Baruch Hu. Yikadal v'yikadash shemei Rabbah, v'yalamad yivrak yirutei v'yamlich malchutei, v'chayechon v'yomechon v'chayei dechol beit Yisrael. Bagala, bagala, ובזמן קריב יאמרו, אמן. יהי שמי רבא מבורך, לעולם לעלמי עלמיה יפרח. יפרח, ישתבח, יפאר, ויתרומם, ויתנשא, ויתהדר, ויתעלה, ויתהלל, שמי דקודשה. ברכו לאלה מכל ברכתה ושירתה, תושבחתה ונחמתה, דמירן בעלמה, ואמרו אמן. ברכו את אדוני המבורך. ברוך אדוני המבורך לעולם ועד. Roll into dark, roll into light, night becomes day, day turns to night. Roll into dark, roll into light, night becomes day, day turns to night. Baruch Ata Adonai Hama'ariv Aravim.
As we mark this Refugee Shabbat with Ahavat Olam, Ahavat Olam is about the teachings that we learn from the Torah, but in a broader sense, the life lessons that someone brings us. We call that the person's Torah. And when we come and are gathered together with people of many different cultures, many different ways of seeing the world, our life is so enriched. Beneath a broken street lamp, shards of glass and remnants of humanity linger on the sidewalk. A hungry child cries out for food. A widow walks with tears in her eyes. But in her heart, there is still hope for peace. When will the fighting end? Her children ask wearily. She answers patiently. When anger gives way to compassion, when hatred gives way to love, when darkness gives way to light, promise me one thing, my children. Promise me that you will always act in ways that will fill the world with compassion and light. Baruch atah Adonai ohev amo Yisrael.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Leolam Vaed. If you are still standing, you may be seated. ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך, והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם, בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם לאות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם. Teach us, God, to treasure the differences that distinguish one person from another. Fill us with the strength to overcome senseless fear and hatred. Open our hearts to the radiance that shines forth from every human soul. Inspire us to shed our apathy. Remind us that it is our obligation to be responsible for one another. Open our ears to the cries of all who are in need of our assistance. Give us the courage to combat prejudice and intolerance wherever they exist. Teach us to see each other through your eyes, God. In your eyes, all people are equally loved, equally precious. Bless us all, God, with compassion, with kindness, and with peace. ונאמר, יפדה אדוני את יעקב, וגאלו מיד חזק ממנו, ברוך אתה אדוני גאל ישראל.
5 years ago, at the height of the refugee crisis in Europe, I went with a group of rabbis to Germany. Germany had taken in over 1 million people. And we spoke with different people. We learned their stories. People who weren't part of the Muslim majority in Syria. And for that, they were persecuted and they fled. Young men who had the choice either flee or be forced to become part of the army. We heard their stories of escape, and we went to refugee centers. And I stood in amazement where this country, which caused so much destruction just years earlier in the past century, now made itself a home for refugees. The Berlin Wall is down, and there was a set of photographs, huge photographs along the wall, called War on the Wall. And it showed just one village and the devastation. And we had this visceral reminder of the importance of caring and taking in people who seek refuge. I hope that the day never comes that I will need to flee my country in pursuit of safety or a better life. I pray that if I do, it's not as a result of violence, and that we don't have to leave our lives behind us with nothing but a bag and any remaining family members by our side. If circumstances ever force us to flee, I hope we're not called animals. And treated as subhuman criminals, and simply because we want to live. Should it be so dire that we are forced to separate from our children with the hope that they would find a better, safer life? If it were so very bad that I would rather they leave me and go on their own in a new country with nothing but faith and hope in their pocket, I hope the world would care for my priceless children and not discard them, or simply let them fall through the cracks. May they be sheltered and protected. Baruch atah Adonai haporei sukat shalom aleinu v'al amo Yisrael v'al Yerushalayim v'al kol bnei Adam.
ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם, לברית עולם, ברית עולם. ביני ובין בני ישראל, אותי לעולם. ביני ובין בני ישראל, אותי לעולם. כי ששת ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ, וביום השביעי שבת וינפש. ביני ובין בני ישראל, אותי לעולם. ביני ובין בני ישראל, אותי לעולם. ושמרו בני ישראל et HaShabbat, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם, ברית עולם. Please rise as you may be comfortable. We begin the Amidah. Adonai, Sephatai Tiftach, Ufi Yagid Tehilatecha. Adonai, Sephatai Tiftach, Ufi Yagid Tehilatecha. Oh God, open up my lips as I begin to pray. Oh God, open up my lips as I begin to pray. Adonai, Sephatai Tiftach, Ufi Yagid Tehilatecha. Adonai, Sephatai Tiftach, Ufi Yagid Tehilatecha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei Avotenu v'Imotenu, Elohei Abraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel v'Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol Hagibor v'Hanora, El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim v'Konei Hakol, וזוכר חסדי אבות ואימהות ומביא גאולה לבני בניהם למען שמו באהבה מלך עוזר מושיע ומגן ברוך אתה אדוני מגן אברהם ועזרת שרה אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני מחיי הכל אתה רב להושיע משיב הרוח ומוריד הגשם מכלכל חיים בחסד, בחיי הכל ברחמים רבים, סומך נופלים ורופא חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר, מי כמוך בעל גבורות ומידו מלך, מלך ממית ומחיה ומצמיח ישועה ונאמן אתה לחיות הכל ברוך אתה אדוני בחיי הכל אתה קדוש ושמך קדוש וקדושים בכל יום יהללוך סלה ברוך אתה אדוני האל הקדוש. Please be seated. Well, please continue your prayers privately. And when you are ready, you may be seated. Just a second, please. ישראל עמך תשים לעולם. שלום רב על ישראל עמך תשים לעולם. שלום רב על ישראל עמך תשים לעולם. שלום רב על ישראל עמך תשים לעולם. כי אתה הוא מלך אדון לכל השלום. כי אתה הוא מלך אדון לכל השלום. שלום רב על ישראל עמך תשים לעולם. שלום רב על ישראל עמך תשים לעולם. וטוב בעיניך לברך את עמך ישראל בכל עת ובכל שעה ובכל שעה בשלומך. שלום שלום רב על ישראל עמך תשים לעולם. 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 תשים לעולם, תשים לעולם, תשים לעולם. שלום. ברוך אתה אדוני המברך את עמו ישראל בשלום. And we join together with the words of Asa Shalom, a prayer for peace. Asa Shalom bimroma, uyase Shalom aleinu. Shalom bimroma, uyase Shalom aleinu. Osa Shalom bimroma, uyase Shalom aleinu. Yase Shalom, Yase Shalom, Shalom aleinu ve'al kol Israel. Yase Shalom, Yase Shalom, Shalom aleinu ve'al kol ha'olam. Ve'imru, Amen.
In our service, we turn now to the words of Mishaberach, asking God to bring blessing upon all those in our lives, all those in our communities, in our world, who are in need of healing. First, we start with a verse that invites us to draw on the strength that is within us and the strength that comes from without, divine sources and friends. Then we'll offer the names of those we're thinking of this week before continuing with the second verse. Help us find the this Shabbat, we are thinking of Peter Jetton, Steve Eng, Sue Horn, Tony Linder, Lisa Siegel, Jack Greenberg, James Klein, George Gurniff, Kathy Lowry, and Larry Wang, Larry Fingeret, Gary Valen, Sarah Bat Rivka, Shlomo Ben Alice, Michael Butler, Rabbi James Perman, Harav Rachel Bat Shmuel Ufruma, Chana Rachel Bat Betty, Jerry Spargel, Shirley Spargel, Carlotta Page, Mackenzie, Martin Pachersky, as well as all those whose names you are putting in the chat and all those names we hold in our hearts. With refuah shalema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen.
It's an honor for me this evening to welcome Delegate Kathy Tran. And again, I want to say hello to Matthew and Davin, Charlotte, Quinn, Elise, and Warren, and also happy birthday to Charlotte, whose birthday was last week. Kathy and her parents fled Vietnam as boat refugees when she was just 7 months old. On the voyage, she grew sick and she almost died. Although many other countries offered them asylum, they waited 13 months to be able to come to the United States. Kathy has devoted her career to ensuring that families have the opportunity to achieve the American dream. She worked for 12 years at the U.S. Department of Labor, where she served as the acting administrator for the Office of Workforce Investment and the director of the Division of Policy, Legislation, and Regulation. From there, she went on to work at the National Immigration Forum, one of the nation's leading immigration advocacy organizations. To me, just getting to know Kathy and the family, I was just so moved over spending 2 years together with Kathy's incredible commitment to people and to using government to make our world a caring and a better place. And it's a great honor for me now to welcome Delegate Kathy Tran.
Good evening. Can you hear me, Rabbi?
Yes, speak just a little louder. There we go.
I'll certainly do that. I am so delighted to join you tonight, Rabbi Crystal and Temple Sinai. We are having a late Shabbat dinner, so if we get a little bit rowdy, I will move. But I am very heartened to see other babies on the screen. And Rabbi Crystal, Matt and I, we miss you, and we so enjoyed your friendship and leadership when you were with us at Temple B'nai Shalom. You brought incredible light to our community, and thank you. All right, so I hope you caught a glimpse of baby Warren, because you haven't had a chance to meet him yet. He's a squealer. But Shabbat Shalom, everybody, and good evening. I want to just again thank you so much for inviting me. Matt and I and our kids and Ashley, who is our friend, is sitting with us and was just really enjoying services tonight. And Davin, who is in his bar mitzvah classes, was comparing all of your tunes to various songs tonight to how we sing them at TBS. And there were some differences and some similarities. And so we really enjoyed kind of doing that. But I am just incredibly honored to be with you on Shabbat, on this particular Shabbat, to lift up refugees as part of a national observance along with many other synagogues across our country. As Rabbi Crystal was telling you my story, in 1979, my parents and I were refugees. We were escaping from Vietnam on a rickety boat with hundreds of others. And we were at sea for several days, during which time we were pirated a couple of times. Towards the end of our trip, our boat actually broke apart, and we luckily at that point had reached the shores of a once deserted Malaysian island, and that was soon just teeming with people who were boat refugees like our family. My mom was 26, my dad was 33, and I was just an infant, not quite 7 months old, so a little bit younger than Warren now. My mom remembers the night that we left our homeland, that there were no stars. She remembers it pitch black, and it was so dark that she could not tell where the ocean ended and the sky began. And as we left the shores into this watery abyss, my mom wondered if she would ever see her mother again, if she would ever be able to call somebody else Maya or mom. She wondered how we could possibly survive. My parents' decision to leave their family, their country, and everything they knew was extremely heart-wrenching and difficult for them. Yet, the unknown of a dangerous open sea was a preferable alternative to the oppressive regime that they were under at the time in Vietnam. My father had recently been released from re-education prison, and my parents realized they had no future in their homeland. My parents' and my family's journey in search of hope, opportunity, and freedom is very similar to journeys made by 800,000 other Vietnamese boat refugees, as well as millions of other refugees from around the world, including many Jews. Today, there are about 80 million forcibly displaced people worldwide, including 30 to 34 million children. Whether on the Mediterranean Sea or at our own southern border, people are desperate for a better life for themselves and their children, and they're risking their own lives in search of a new one. In 2018, I read an article in the Washington Post that sticks with me today. It was a story about Shamsuddin Marzag, a middle-aged Tunisian. Shamsuddin, he's a former fisherman, but his job now is to scour the beaches in his town in Tunisia to look for the bodies of people who have died trying to cross the Mediterranean Sea in search of the values that my family did, hope and opportunity and freedom. And when he finds a body, he puts it in a bag and he delivers it to the local mortuary. And upon its release, he washes it and takes it to a cemetery where he buries it in a grave that he has dug with his own hands. He's determined to treat these people who have died alone and far from home with dignity. And the image of Shamsuddin Marzag combing the Tunisian beaches to give these migrants, these immigrants and refugees, these people a dignified burial, it haunts me, right? It makes me emotional just to think about it. There are only estimates of how many Vietnamese boat refugees died at sea, possibly between 200,000 to 400,000 people. I imagine sometimes the bones of the dead just lying on the ocean floor, pointing towards better futures, unrealized. And in 2020 alone, there were 1,400 refugees that died crossing the Mediterranean Sea. You can imagine what the bottom of that ocean may look like. We can spend a lot of time debating the geopolitics that have led to situations where people like my family, possibly many of yours, are so desperate for better lives that the dangerous unknown is a better alternative than the comfort of land. We may never agree on those root causes and the solutions that may be needed to remedy these complex situations. But I hope that we can agree to offer hope. For generations, the United States has been a beacon of hope for many. At our refugee camp in Malaysia, my father, who was a practicing dentist in Vietnam, and I'll tell you more about him in a little bit, he volunteered at the dental clinic and he organized trash pickups along the beaches. And my mother, who was fluent in English and French, spent her time volunteering to provide translation and interpretation services to a lot of different consulate offices that had set up shop on this island. And we had many offers to resettle. We were offered to resettle by Canada and Great Britain, Australia, and France. But my parents were determined that they were going to wait for the United States to process our application. And we waited 13 months, which at that time was a really long time in the early 80s. And we were resettled by the International Rescue Committee in Los Angeles. I had an aunt who had come here in 1975 with the initial exodus. And so we were kind of resettled to be near her. But the United States has not always shown compassion for the most vulnerable seeking refuge upon its shores, often leading to absolutely devastating consequences. We are too familiar with the heartbreaking story of the MS St. Louis and how turning our backs in 1939 on these 900 Jews who were desperate for survival led to the deaths of 254 of them. These and countless other lives could have easily been saved. We just ended 4 years where anti-refugee policies became the norm in the United States. You know, as I said earlier, there are 80 million people who've been forcibly displaced worldwide. Of those, 26.3 million are considered refugees. Our president determines the number of refugees that will be accepted into our country each year. For fiscal year 2021, so that is October 2020 through September of 2021, the refugee cap in the United States is only 15,000. That's the lowest level in our nation's modern history. Compare this to 85,000 in 2016. Not only did we admit historically low numbers of refugees during a worldwide humanitarian crisis, but we also narrowed the circumstances in which people can apply for asylum. We eliminated domestic violence and gang violence as reasons that you can seek refuge. We made it much more difficult for people to seek asylum at our port of entry. We also tore families apart, right, who are seeking asylum at our southern borders, leaving parents who are frantically searching for their children alone and terrified. And to this day, many of those children have not yet been reunited with their parents. Some have just simply, we can't find those families anymore. We made it harder for refugee resettlement agencies to actually assist refugees who are here in the United States, many of them having to close their doors. These are just some of the discouraging actions that we've taken. And I just think, simply put, we must and can do better to protect and support refugees. The federal government has now pledged to set the annual global refugee admissions cap for the US at 125,000 and will seek to raise it over time. And while we need to accept more refugees, we also need to build and rebuild the infrastructure to admit them, to resettle them, and then to provide for support. Refugees must pass security and medical checks. They complete numerous interviews. They're some of the most toughest situations to actually come into the United States. And then they have to wait for their turn for a slot. Sometimes this can take many years. For my family, it was 13 months and it was considered long in the early 80s. But now refugees who live in camps, the average wait is about 17 years. And once refugees are here, we need to support their entry into our communities and our workforce. Many refugees are skilled professionals in their home country and are hoping for opportunities to fulfill their career potential, raise their families here in the US. I mentioned my dad was a practicing dentist in Vietnam. When we came here, he wasn't able to get his license. We didn't have the means for my dad to just go and study directly to get his license, and he didn't have the English abilities to do so. So we thought he would find a job as a dental technician, an occupation in this country that does not require a high school diploma. But he was told over and over and over again, he either didn't have the English skills or he was overqualified. My father finally found a job as a dental technician. Mr. Sam hired him. Mr. Sam recognized that my father had the technical skills and he may be able to be a good mentor to other employees. My mom and dad were so proud of my father's first job. My mom actually still has his first paycheck stub. He made $33.35 an hour, which was minimum wage then. And over time, my parents have been able to achieve their American dreams. They've been small business owners. My dad obtained his dental license. He practiced in Vietnam. They're both retired now in California. I'm sorry, he practiced in San Diego. They're both retired now in California. And my brother, who was born here, serves in the US Marine Corps. And when I was a junior in college, I completed a summer internship with the International Rescue Committee, in Boston. So this IRC had resettled our family in LA area. I got to intern with their office in Boston. It just felt so gratifying and to come full circle to be able to help newly resettled refugees from Kosovo, Albania, and Vietnam and Iraq. And now in the House of Delegates in Virginia, I champion policies to make sure that Virginia is more welcoming and inclusive of immigrants and refugees. In communities across this country, from Montana to Minnesota, New Hampshire to here in Virginia, we understand that refugees strengthen our economic, social, and cultural vitality. A 2017 report by the US Department of Health and Human Services found that between 2005 and 2014, refugees contributed about $269 billion in tax revenues at all levels of government. So I really think it's important that we stop hiding behind geopolitics and fear, that we stop dehumanizing refugees. These are mothers and fathers. They are children who fled persecution and violence, and they deserve a second chance to rebuild their lives. They deserve to be treated with dignity. They deserve to be treated humanely. Now, I've had many conversations with neighbors in my area here in Northern Virginia who speak admiringly about their parents or grandparents who risked everything for better futures. They share their loves of friends who've been former refugees. They recall how their congregations showed great moral courage to help resettle Vietnamese refugees during the 80s. And these conversations have affirmed for me that the values of hope, opportunity, and freedom really are the foundation of our democracy, and they are the values that unite us. As Americans, as former refugees and Jews, as parents raising our kids Jewishly, we have an important opportunity and a very unique role in standing in solidarity with today's refugees. We understand too well that fleeing persecution is one of the most desperate and uncertain times of our lives, and that in these moments, we deserve to be treated with compassion and dignity. The Torah teaches us to love the stranger living amongst us. And I commend your temple for participating in the National Refugee Shabbat. I'm just so incredibly heartened by your leadership and compassion and generosity. Matt and I have our 5 kids that Rabbi Crystal introduced earlier, and we are working hard to raise them Jewishly. Our youngest daughter is Elise Minkan, so she's in my lap a little bit earlier. And Elise, Elise was inspired by Ellis Island. Matt's family passed through Ellis Island in their search of opportunity in America as they were escaping anti-Semitism at the turn of the century. And Minh Khun is Vietnamese for bright bell, and her name was inspired by the Liberty Bell. To us, her name means to ring the bells of liberty and champion opportunity for all. And for Matt and me, we cannot truly raise our children Jewishly if we stand by quietly during this worldwide humanitarian crisis. So we too are using our voices to lift up refugees. I think now is the time for our country to demonstrate moral clarity and leadership, to be this beacon of hope like it was for my own family about 40 years ago. We must continue to welcome refugees and immigrants because this is who we are and what we do as a country. So I thank you and I wish you Shabbat Shalom.
Kathy, thank you so much. Matt, it's good to see you. I am just so inspired every time we're together, and your commitment is just incredible. And I'm just overwhelmed. I'm so moved, and to see the life that you and your family have, and It's also great to see your mother from time to time for the last 2 years. But thank you so much. You really gave us a charge, both from the heart and the big picture and the importance of this issue for each and every one of us. So thank you so very much.
Thank you so very much. Thank you.
So I get to give the announcements this evening. Our musical program is made possible with generous support by Edgar Snyder and an anonymous donor. We invite you to our weekly classes and programs, Havdalah and Song Circle on Saturdays, Hartman Learning on Sunday, the weekly Torah study, and meditation on Wednesday. Those are separate. This week we have the Brotherhood Virtual Lunch on Monday, Rosh Chodesh on March 16th. And we'd love for you to celebrate your birthday this month. So send in your name for March 19th. And please mark your calendars and join us. Rabbi Karen Gadar will be with us on Monday, March 22nd. And hey, Warren. Oh, that's me. I still see you. Karen was a classmate of mine at HUC. She's one of the most extraordinary original thinkers and spirit and being a spiritual presence in the Reform movement today. And it'll be a really amazing evening, March 22nd at 7 o'clock. We continue with the Aleinu.
Instead of our traditional chant for Aleinu, this is an alternative reading that comes to us from Rabbi Rachel Grant Meyer, who is the Director of Education at HIAS. Aleinu, it was on us. It was on us from the moment our ancestors were first forced to leave home, charged with transforming their wandering into a blessing for all people. It has been on us since that wandering became encoded in our DNA, from Avram Ha'ivri, Avram, the one who crossed over, to Ha'ivrim, the Jewish people, all of us inheriting the legacy of centuries of crossing from one home to another. As our people became a refugee people, we took on the sacred responsibility to see our story as bound up with the stories of all who continue to wander. Aleinu, it was on us. Aleinu, it is on us. Love the stranger as you would love yourself, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt, God said. To advocate for a world in which the 68 million people who flee for their lives can find protection and a place to call home. To stand with those who leave nightmarish situations only to undertake nightmarish journeys, so that they may exercise their legal right to find protection in these United States. To cry out for the families who are separated from one another, detained without an end in sight, babies calling for parents who may never see them again. To speak up when those in power shut the doors of our country to victims of violence and persecution. To stay outraged from a place of love rather than hate, from a place of welcome rather than exclusion. These two are our obligations without measure. Aleinu, it is on us. We know the cost of making any other choice, of demurring from the holy task of transforming our wandering into blessing. As we bow and bend to the source of freedom with visions of a repaired world in our minds and the commitment to fulfill these visions on our tongues and at our fingertips, Aleinu, it will always be on us to remember that there is no us and there is no them. There are only God's children, each deserving of blessings of liberty and justice. We turn now to our Kaddish as we remember those who have died at this time in years past. And we think of these loved ones: Bernice Jaffe Avis, Louis W. Bennett, Dave Birkenfeld, Marilyn Safian Block, Paul Broslowski, Shirley Polymus Cochran, Caroline Cohen, Franny Cohen, Harry Cooper, Rebecca Engelman, Regina Feinberg, Rhoda Lurie Freed, Mary Gatemi, Evelyn Goldberg, Dora Goldstein, Joseph B. Gutstein, Barbara Hackman, Max Handelsman, Philip J. Harris, Louise Henry, Molly Holtzman, Joel Idigson, Lillian G. J., Bernard German, Lester Carlton, Anna Silverman Karsh, Louis Goldsmith Katz, Herman Red Krasny, Ruth C. Kunden, Alex Lampel, Martin R. Lehman, Paul Levitt, Rachel Lilienthal, Dorothy Love, Jean Ruth Mandris, Celia Marcus, Maurice Marcus, Ben Moretsky, Robert Bernard Margolis, Edna Matoski, Shirley Ann Miller, Marion Mursky, Rose Middleman, Dove Nicholsberger, Bessie Olitsky, Jordan Pantel, Max Roth, Manuel Ruiz, Ira Sadowski, Bessie Safian, Nathan Safian, Lillian Schoenfeld, John M. Schumacher, Josie Pfeiffer Schwartz, Herbert Siegel, Leonard Serban, Abe Silverblatt, Leo J. Stein, Richard Vernier, Alfred H. Wagman, Harriet Wedner, Anna Klutchman Weinstein, Jerome Weisberg, Jerome Wolfson, Sidney Zuckerman. We are also remembering on this Shabbat Lorraine Jeffy, Thea Persoff, Alan Klein, Charlotte Winkle Chazen, and Shelley Frankel, Irving LaPatten, and Helene Aronoff, as well as recent deaths whose lives we still mourn, deaths we still mourn. Alice Siegel, the mother of Ed and Barb Siegel, grandmother of Jamie, Howard Wackler, Terrence Alcorn, the husband of Hope Alcorn, Faye Schwartz, the mother of Marty and Fern Schwartz, Fern Kenny Oski, Amy and David Stengel, Andrew and Mary Schwartz, Abraham Kay, the brother-in-law of Drew and Jan Barkley, Jeffrey Holst, Andy Lockery, the boyfriend of Gina Fayola, Greta Coleman, the sister-in-law of Phyllis Strife, and Greta Coleman, the sister-in-law of Phyllis Dreyfus. As we think of them, we say, Zichronam livracha, may their memories be for us a blessing. Together we offer these words. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei rabbah.
Amen.
Velma divrach yiruteh v'yamlich malchuteh. B'chayechon uv'yomechon uv'chayei d'chol beit Yisrael. B'agalau v'zman kariv v'imru amen. Yehei shmei rabbah mivrach le'elam u'lalmei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh. V'yithadar v'yitaleh v'yithalal Tushbechata v'nechimata, damiran be'alma v'imru amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'al kol yoshvei tevel, v'imru amen. May the one who creates peace on high bring peace to us, to all Israel, and to all who mourn, as together we say, amen.
We are commanded in the book of Exodus to love the stranger, not to oppress the stranger. And every year as we read this, and every year as we remember that we were once strangers ourselves, we are reminded to be more aware than we've been, and to continue to make the world a better place, and to make people, strangers, perhaps, into neighbors, and neighbors into friends. Who gave you the light? that warms you and surrounds. You walk from here to there. Who gave you the ground? Who gave you the stars to wish upon and dream? You aim your ship and sail. Who gave you the sea? Once you were afraid, a stranger in the town. Who gave you your hope? Who is calling now? Ve'avtem et hager ki gerim heitem. Ve'avtem et hager ki gerim heitem. Love the stranger, you are strangers. Love the stranger, you are strangers. Who gave you the breath that lifts your voice to sing? You fall and rise again. Who gave you the wings? They're just beyond the wall. They fall upon the shore. We can hear them knock. Who gave us the door? Ve'avtem et hager ki gerim heitem. Ve'avtem et hager ki gerim heitem. Love the stranger, you are strangers. Love the stranger, you are strangers. How easy it can be to let the fear take hold. You were once set free, remember we were told. Love the stranger, you were strangers. Love the stranger, you were strangers.
Ve'avtem et hager ki gerim heitem. May we love all of the strangers among us. We have been strangers in different places. May we all become at home enough to find blessing and to share blessing on this Shabbat and every day. Shabbat Shalom.